Good morning. This is Lifelong Educators, where we, the community of people who are lifelong educators, come together to discuss our problems and the solutions that we might have, the new ideas, the innovations, the new educational tech that we want to develop. Every week, we have special guests that can help us get along that journey. And this week, we have Jarrid and Sylvia Hall. Say hello to the nice people, Jarrid and Sylvia.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And also, we have Dotan Tamir, who is coming to us all the way from Israel, where it is something like 6 o'clock this evening. So say hello to the nice people too, Dotan.
True. Good morning. Good evening.
Okay. So Sylvia and Jarrid are the creators of a wonderful product called GAB-on. And what this is about is that they, like you, like some of the parents in our audience today, probably had the experience where your teenager came home from school and you said, hey, how was your day today? And they said, and audience, you can fill it in. They said, fine. Well, they got smart about it. And they realized something is that the communication between parent and teacher and the support that the student gets from the home really makes a huge difference in their learning. Dotan knows a lot about this because of his product Click2, an online educational device that can create learning possibilities in schools, in camps, all around the world. Well, Sylvia and Jarrid were doing this with their own son in their home. So what I'd like to say here is that I have a little quote here from Ann Anderson from the Annenberg Institute for School Reform. And they say that more than 40 years of data collection tells us that the most accurate predictor of a student's academic success is the extent to which the family is involved in their education. So Sylvia and Jarrid, you had this problem. Your son, Austin, would come home, give you that fine answer, and you wanted to know more. So you took this problem into your own hands. Tell us what you did to solve it.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. Great to be here. Thanks so much for hosting this. And Dotan, great to meet you and excited to be here. Yeah, so we did take it, we took it on personally. Austin learns differently is part of the challenge that we had. And for Austin, remembering his day is a challenge. He physically can't remember it the way his neurology is set up, which is quite typical of kids who learn differently. And I was asking about his day, and generally it was fine, or I could tell he was trying to create a conversation or try to find something to bring up. It wasn't fitting. So I went in and talked to his teacher, and I asked, why can't Austin share his day with me? What's going on? And she said, well, asking Austin to try harder to remember his day is like asking a blind person to try harder to see. He can't do it. And so that was a spark of two ways. First of all, I felt like the dad I didn't want to be. I wanted to be a better dad than that, understand how to help my son. And then I just thought, how can I help? What can I do? And based on personal experiences and family experiences, I just thought, well, what if we helped him capture some hints and reminders during the day and brought those home? And then we could talk about those hints and reminders. And the idea was to put him back, give him a memory trail, like breadcrumbs of where he was, what he was doing, what he was part of. And then with that reminder, it would be a spark for conversation. And that's exactly what happened for us. It was really exciting. The first time he came home with what we call a GAB, which is a hint and reminder. It was onion skin and lake water. He was in science class and wrote in onion skin and lake water. I think most everyone would say, well, what does that mean? And that's the point. There was no pictures, there was no sentence. I didn't know what that meant. He needed to tell me a story. But at first he couldn't remember. It took him about 90 seconds to really walk around the kitchen and thought about it. And he sat down and said, Dad, I remember. We were in science class and we were looking at onion skin under a microscope, and we saw the cell walls and we saw the nucleus, we saw the pieces and parts. It was so neat. His eyes were literally lit up and his body language changed. He was leaning in because he remembered something for one of the first times about school. And it was just an aha moment for him and an exciting moment for us. And then he talked about how the teacher gave him a vial, him and his team, he was in a team, gave him a vial to go down to the pond behind the school and get a sample of lake water, bring it back, looked at it under the microscope and found a water bug, named it Robetta, and created a cartoon. And the story went on and on. But what also happened was I shared a story about catching pollywogs and frogs growing up, and his eyes lit up. What's that? What did you do? And Sylvia told a story about falling into a pond covered in green pond scum.
It was awful.
But what happened was the family came together. Gracie, our daughter, was talking about things. And for the first time, we all came together around a school event that was memorable for him. We went back, there's so much going on there. I'm obviously excited talking about it, but we made it personal. We really took it on ourselves, and we think we solved a big problem.
I find that absolutely amazing. But what about the people here in our Facebook group? And I just want to say, please, people in the Facebook group, if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat. Jarrid and Sylvia would be more than happy to help you out and answer them. So, question for you, Jarrid. You invented something. What the heck did you invent?
What it turns out is I invented a lot more than I thought I did. When I did it, all I wanted straight up was a conversation with Austin and tried to get a dialogue going and help him help him with a memory boost, I guess you could say. And so when we did it at first, we thought, okay, this is great, this is wonderful. We connected and we did it for a while. But as we've learned from that point in time forward, we've talked to neurologists, researchers, educators, and what we really created was, cognitive growth. Brains actually grow in kids who have consistent conversations with their brains. There was a study done at MIT that looked at the before and after pictures through an fMRI, they call it, of what would happen when children have consistent conversations with a dialogue back and forth. The brains literally grow. We find that the evidence shows kids are more engaged in school. We found that the cortisol levels, I think it's cortisol levels in brains come down because when kids are in a state of fear or anxiety, which a lot of kids were throughout COVID, but also in general, especially special education kids, bring that down, they're more open to learning. They're more open to participating and engaging. We gave our son a voice. Actually, after we started doing this a little while, he won the Grit Award in school because of self-advocacy. He learned to step up and say, I don't understand, can you please help me? His grades went up. We have a lot of stories about how this really made very transformative moments in the students, but also the parents' lives and understanding. So we think we created a bridge. And what we're hearing a lot, people are saying, is a safe space. Kids can have a voice that they are leading the conversation, and the parents listen and they participate. And what we keep hearing over and over is, I feel like I'm in a safer space. All the media, all the extraneous noise is gone, and it's just a parent and a child or a family talking about something the child is leading. And it's a transformative moment for some people.
I think simply it's technology that harnesses parent engagement and gives students agency and supports their mental health. And it's very simple to use in the classroom for the teachers, for the educators, for the students, and it's very simple to use at home. And people always, they often kind of laugh because we built technology to get people off of technology, which is a really odd thing to do in this day and age. But as Jarrid mentioned, the learnings that we've had through so many of the research team that we're partnered with right now, they've been invaluable lessons. 40 years of research, as you mentioned. Ann Henderson, you read her quote, Karen Mapp at Harvard, Dr. Mike Nakula at UPenn. They have just studied this for so many years. And so what we're able to offer is something very simple for all stakeholders with incredible outcomes.
So it's simple to use, I assume.
Very simple. The way it works is that during the school day, whether it be after each class or at a reflection period at the end of the day, the student can pick up, open up a phone, a Chromebook, a tablet of any kind, and they just go to their entry form. It's a drop-down menu. And they can choose science, math, English, art, wherever the topic is, and it's all manageable, editable by the teacher or parent, whoever sets it up. They choose a topic, science, and then they freeform in. The idea is 1 to 5 words that give them a hint or reminder about a topic, an event, something they want to talk about with the family at the end of the day. For us, our first one was science, which was the subject, and the topic was onion skin and lake water. And they enter that, and then it's saved automatically. And then as a parent, I receive it on my phone. And at the end of the day, I get a reminder, your GABs have been entered. And then I can open them up. And I've had parents say, when I get that, all I want to do is find out what it means. It's a mystery. So it's really simple. For teachers, one of the biggest questions we get is, what is the teacher's role in this? And once it's set up, the teacher is more an advisor or a supporter. They don't have any work to do, really. If they make it part of the homework and they give the child time to do it and track it, we have a dashboard that teachers can track. That's all they need to do. It's really up to the child to go in, open it up, enter the information, and that goes at home, and then they lead the conversation at home with the parents. So as Sylvia said, we've really made this as simple as possible. And we went to our engineer, John Bennett, who's building our technology for us, and said, we need this to be the least amount of time spent on an app possible, because we want to enter it, look at it, put it down, as Sylvia said. So that's kind of how it works, but it's super simple.
Yeah, just a couple of points. Sorry, is we were inspired to create this for our son, but we really built it for all kids. So kids with all challenges in underserved communities, in all communities, they can use this. And it can be used in all classrooms. We know that educators don't have a lot of time, but we also know that's not the only reason they pick up a new tool. If you talk to teachers and say, well, it doesn't take any of your work or time in the classroom, they recognize value. They know when something's going to impact their classroom and their students. And so the way it was built was in partnership with educators. Yeah. In fact, one of the teachers said, if I have 2 minutes, your daughter has 2 minutes. And if you can build it within those parameters, I'm happy to put it in our classroom.
That's the Wilson principle.
Yeah,
Katie
so we
Wilson
named it the Wilson principle.
Was the first teacher who actually used it in the public outside of our initial use case. And that's how she said it. It was great. If you can make it work within 2 minutes, I'm in.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. Super simple.
So I recognize the value of it. Yeah.
So,
No, I'm so
Jarrid
with
and
that.
Sylvia, sorry, so Jarrid and Sylvia said you build it in partnership with educators.
Yes.
And I can say, as an educator, I come from being an educator and work with kids, and sometimes you have, I think the most satisfying moment for an educator is to see your students, the kids that you work with getting excited about what you teach them. It's not just, okay, I have to learn that, I learned it, fine, it's good. But if you get excited about it, but then you manage to transfer that excitement to the wider family, to the parents, to the siblings, to anybody at home, and that for an educator, that's been always been a very, very hard challenge. I know it from the camps that we had kids having the time of their lives learning. Not always they called it learning, right? But they were learning, and they went back. Their parents picked them up, and they went back. And we were trying to tell parents how to act. What should they ask in order to get some of the experience? And we never hacked it, right? So I think what you created is really hacking that little thing. It's basically allowing the kids themselves to come up with the way that they saw it. Like they call it a name. It's not how you call it. It's not how the parent call it. I can ask something as a parent, but I don't ask that. I usually don't ask the right question. So they tell you what to ask, and then they feel very comfortable in answering.
Yeah, and you hit so many wonderful points there. And the key is student agency. Mm-hmm. This is student-led and student managed. And to your point, they're choosing what they go home and talk with their families about. And then they lead those conversations with their families at home. And the key to that is often you'll get GABs, as we call them, come home, and it's about a challenge or a struggle they've had at school in a certain subject. And then the parent is able to help navigate that challenge, talk them through it, not necessarily homework, but perhaps a social challenge, a peer challenge, something they're concerned about in the real world. But the other piece of that is they also put in their joys, right? As you said, what excited them in school? And when they can come home and talk about what excited them at school, then that is opening up a window for their parents to see where their child finds joy and what they like doing, where their strengths might be, and then where are their possibilities. And then it helps that child recognize those possibilities within themselves. And that is tremendous for their evolution into higher education, into the workforce, into life fulfillment. It's this tiny piece that we may not think about, that conversations consistently every day within your family builds that relationship. And then teaches that child how to build other relationships and develops that agency, that then they can go and recognize they need relationships to move forward in life. Life is not overcoming things in a solo pathway. It is about relationships. It's about collaboration. It is about understanding where you need help and where you can help others, and doing it where you find joy. So
I
that
think,
one little
you know, we
conversation
keep,
sparks so much,
we
Yeah.
keep talking about in this show about how education is magical. And I think the word joy, the word fun, those are the words that should lead education, because that's something that kids relate to, that's something that parents can relate to, and that's something that makes everything possible. When it's fun, then it can be challenging, it'd be hard. As long as it's fun, we can do it. So I like the word joy as an addition. I'll definitely adopt it in addition to the fun and magic on my vocabulary.
I love that. We want it everywhere.
Yeah.
I love that.
Sylvia and Dotan, you both talked about agency, about the student initiating what they wanted to talk about. But I heard Jarrid say that Austin got the Grit Award.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about why grit is so important also.
Yeah, it's for a lot of kids, it's really self-advocacy and self-awareness. When a kid can self-advocate for themselves and they have the agency to stand up and say, hey, I have a question. I have something I need to be able to do. I need to take care of. I have something I'm trying to achieve. And they learn how to have that conversation. It can really change the trajectory of where they go and what they actually end up doing. Grit is part student agency, part advocacy, and part self-awareness. It's a mixture of all those pieces that come together. And it's really important. I mean, there's so much study on grit and advocacy that it really helps determine paths forward. We were working with some researchers that were looking at grit at the United States Military Academy at West Point, and that's a pretty gritful location, or a lot of students there are full of grit, which is really the ability to say, I'm going to go somewhere, I'm going to find a way there, and I'm going to advocate for myself to get there. So that's a really hyper-focused group of individuals who are full of grit. And we believe that when you start advocating for yourself, you learn what that means inherently. It's not taught, it's not a lesson plan. You just start learning it when you talk about something, when you advocate for yourself, when you lead a conversation with your parents, you learn how to do that. It's scaffolding. How do you build the scaffolding by which you can build better conversations, better relationships? It's foundational for everything. Does that answer your question, Jackie?
Beautifully. So I love this idea of magic. I think that's why most of us who are educators went into this field at first. Somebody asked me, why did you want to become a teacher? You don't make that much money. And I said, the magic. Mm-hmm. I think we all share that. So you just told us a beautiful story about how you saw a problem with your own son, how you realized that all parents, teachers, students have this problem about communication and getting support from the home. So you've got this great idea. How the heck did you turn it into something that could be used in the classroom?
That's a great question. Because when we started with Austin, it was a Google Sheet. It was just a bunch of drop downs. And I created this sheet for him and then Gracie as well. Actually started with Austin in his classroom. And for the first week, we were doing GABs with him at the dinner table and having these great conversations. And I love sibling rivalry. Because at one point, Gracie crossed her arms and said, why does he get this? Why don't I get one too? I said, all right. So I wrote a note to her teacher, who was Katie Wilson. And she said, yeah, I love the idea. Why don't you do it? And then after about 3 months of doing it with Gracie in her class, she came to us and said, I really love this idea. Can I use it for the whole class? I thought, oh my gosh, how do I build something? I got to scale this from 2 kids to 30. That's when I used a no-code app to start. I built, it's called AppSheet. So I built the first app that way. And I'm not an engineer. So when I actually created something that could take data from one spot, put it to another, I was like, I won a Super Bowl. I was so excited that data moved into another application and I could show it, it would be on my phone. And we used that with the class originally. And then it just kept growing from there. And we realized the app that I had built through a no-code app wasn't sufficient, couldn't scale. So then we got connected with a great engineer I referenced earlier, John Bennett, loved the mission we were on. We were part of the Social Enterprise Greenhouse, which is an incubator in Providence, Rhode Island. And he was part of that. And we met, he loved it. And we've been working together at building a highly scalable app now. That's really beautiful.
It's been very organic growth. It's we went from a teacher to then the teacher beside her to then the school and then to another school, and it's been very organic. I think in the education system, I think when you hear of a valuable platform that might help your students, it's really those trusted relationships among educators sharing by word of mouth what works in their classrooms that is the most compelling. And so our organic growth just from teacher to school, principal to principal into superintendents has been very natural. And honestly,
I'm wondering, as I'm also working on a product and also developing a company around the technology product for education. Sometimes you start a product and you think, okay, that's going to be the main use case, and we're going to do it for the classroom, and the users are going to be the teachers or the parents or the kids. What did you find out? You had your base assumptions. How, and maybe even ask. I'm going to ask another question. What was the most bizarre or weird or interesting use case that you had so far for this?
So hang on, I have to start because Jarrid is an entrepreneur at heart. So he had his first business when he was 12 years old. So he's a natural at this. And he told me from the very beginning what we may see this as and how we envision how this is going to look and be used as. It may be completely something different. But if it brings value to the user, that is really important. So to your point, we kind of had this idea from the very beginning, it might be used in very unique ways.
Yeah. And one of the I don't know if it was a stumbling block, but a big aha moment for us was when we were using it in my daughter's school, the principal came to me and said, hey, there's a special situation I'd like you to be a part of, because there's a high functioning autistic child and his mom would really like to know more about what's going on in his day. Could you please talk to her? Absolutely. We set it up, drop down menu, science, math, English, art, all the different things that they were doing at school that Gracie was doing. We handed it to her, we set her up on the technology, on the app, and we said, go for it. This is gonna be so, she was excited, we were excited. But 3 days later, we went for coffee to have a, how's it going conversation. And she actually said, this isn't working. When my son comes home, part of the challenges he has with his autism is that he has high anxiety. So he feels like he has to report to me. And so when he reports, he cries. And so that's not going to work for us. We said, okay, how can we change that? And we talked, she kept saying, no, no, no. I said, well, what can we do? And she said, well, if you could ask questions, what made me laugh today? What challenges did I overcome? And what was the other one?
What made me proud today?
What made me proud today? Were the 3 questions that she thought would be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we put those right in the app while we were talking to her. The next day he entered some GABs, and the following day we got an amazing email saying, oh my gosh, I've never had a conversation like that with my son. What happened was the GAB that came home was fire drill. And when loud noises or a lot of commotion came up, he would get very upset and had a hard time managing all that and processing all that input to him, and became very upset and challenging for him. But when she asked about fire drill, the mom said, "Did you cry?" Well, first of all, she said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Well, hard day." "Did you cry?" "I cried." "Mom, why do I cry, but the other kids don't cry? They think it's fun." She said that was the first authentic conversation she had about autism with her son. So definitely a roadblock at first. And now every setup we have has those 3 questions in it, because it gives a child to talk about something outside of school, different than school, and something they can stand up to and be proud about, maybe make a joke about, and they can lead that conversation. So that was a huge aha moment just about children and where they are, whether they're learning challenged or neurotypical. There's all kinds of kids dealing with all kinds of anxiety and stress. How do we allow them to bypass it and find a way to deal with it and to engage with their parents in a way that brings everyone down a level? That was one of the lessons. We've got a lot of lessons. That was a big one.
Yeah. That's an incredible lesson. So if anybody out there in the Facebook group right now is listening to this and has a similar problem, or maybe a story that you could share with your own creation, your own ed tech type of device, that has, as Dotan said, changed from your original intent, I would love you to put it in the chat, and maybe Jarrid and Sylvia, Dotan and I, we can all talk about it together. Because the whole point of all of this, as you can see with GAB-on, is what good use does it bring about? Yeah. So Jarrid and Sylvia, you know, this is an amazing story on your journey to develop GAB-on, but you didn't do it on your own. We had John Gamba, who is innovator in residence at the Graduate School of Education at Penn on last week. And he said, and this is a quote, maybe not a direct quote, but when he said, when he remembers the story of GAB-on, he gets chills. So how did you meet John? How did you get on that path to have him help you and get his support with GAB-on?
Yeah, I'll start it off, because one of the things I'd just like to give a shout out to Sylvia about is, putting herself out there, doing things and, speaking in public, although she's excellent at it, it's not her comfort zone. And so she worked really hard to find ways to get the word out there about GAB-on. And we worked with she found out about a group called Learn Launch that was hosting a competition, a launch competition about EdTech startups. And she earned us a spot in to present at this event. And that's where we met John. Sylvia had worked really hard to get us there. We presented. And at the end of our presentation, John walked up to us and said, "Hi, my name's John Gamba. You need to join the Milk and Pen contest at UPenn." And
our lives changed.
Completely changed at that moment right there.
We met John Gamba and our lives changed. He, I think when you share the same passion and you share similar values and you have similar goals, you just connect at a very different level. And it was almost instant when we met John Gamba and he talked to us about parent engagement. The knowledge of a more engaged parent is a more engaged student. The life-changing trajectory it can have on a student. He totally got it. He got what we were doing. He got our mission. And we clicked because we both have kids and share similar stories. But he is, gosh, I just can't say enough good things. Yeah, we're very fortunate.
One of the things I throw in terms of John Gamba for us is, my day job is at Google, and we go through what's called Perfect twice a year to just evaluate each other and give it quality feedback. And there's measurements of quality leadership, of presence, of knowledge. I mean, every score that we have, he's at the top of the level of everything. Everything that Google would value. John's at the top of it all. He's just so engaged and so supportive and so knowledgeable. His domain expertise is incredible.
And I know he was a guest last week with you, and he's at Catalyst at UPenn, and his phone is probably ringing off the hook now with entrepreneurs trying to get in. But it's interesting that where he works is what he does. Like, he is a catalyst for change. That's what he does, that to his core, for the betterment of kids in education. And so we just are timing. Sometimes you get lucky, and we got lucky.
And one of the things he talked about was creating those meetings that are explosions. I think in his podcast, bringing people together. And that's what he does amazingly well. He has a network that's just so deep and so rich with people, whether it's technical people, educators, administrators, whatever it is, he has contacts. And one of the contacts he made for us, which was, again, another life-changing moment, was he said, I want you to meet someone on the Graduate School of Education research team. They want to hear about this, I think. And we met Andy Danilchuk, who we were going to present to. We walked in ready to present GAB-on. We had our deck ready. We had our presentation up, and he walked in and sat down and said, before you present, if you're not talking about student agency, if you're not talking about how a student's going to lead a conversation with a parent, if you're not talking about how a child is going to have the ability to find some way to connect with their parent on their terms, I don't want to hear about it, because there's too much out there about parent engagement. It's not real. And we just said, that's our presentation. I said, okay, go ahead. So,
and to go back to that point about the parent engagement tools that are out there, certainly they're needed.
Yes.
Those school to home, teacher to parent, emails, texts, different platforms, they're all needed.
Mm-hmm.
And we often find those in the elementary school aged grades and kids. But what is unique about GAB-on is it is not parent, it's not teacher to parent, it's not school to home, it is student to home. And that is the unique difference, is there are three stakeholders in this equation, and it's the student, the parent, and the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And we need all three of them in the game.
Yeah, Pam Cantor, who's the founder of Turnaround for Children, is doing some exceptional work at how to possibly re-engineer the school systems here in America and globally. And she's doing an amazing amount of work. She's a medical doctor, psychiatrist, and dedicated her life to really figuring out how to help kids in trauma. And we interviewed her for some work that we're doing with GAB-on. And she talked about how the three-legged stool is so vital for the child. That connection, we connect the student and the parent, the student and the family, and the family can connect back to the teacher on how the child is doing. Because what we bring is not just what they're doing, but how they're doing. How is that child doing? And that really creates a wonderful communication loop, but with the child leading it and kicking it off and being the catalyst for it all.
But let me, if I may, challenge you with Jack, going back to Jackie's question about John Gamba, and you described some kind of a coincidence and luck by meeting John Gamba, and of course everything that came after this. But it's not luck. It's hard work. It's strategy. It's a way of living. And for the community members of our show, and for those who will actually watch some pieces of it later, if you can come tell them or share with us, what is it that is not luck, that is actually strategy, that is actually something that you have to follow, some basic rules or guidelines to get the word out there, to proceed, to create that kind of network effect.
Yeah, so if I could ask a question along those lines, Dotan, I'm sitting here listening to Sylvia and Jarrid, and I'm thinking, I'm an educator. What if I have some great idea and I want to find my own John Gamba? How do I do that?
Yeah, one of the things we talk a lot about is just, you got to put yourself out there. If you have an idea, I think you can have a sponsor at some point to get some feedback. It's about learning, understanding your market really, really well, and the problem you're trying to solve. And what problem you're solving is who values that, and why do they value it, and what is the value to them. And then finding that type of a group of people, that audience, to get in front of consistently and often, and engage and build relationships, because it's their network effect. You mentioned, Dotan, I believe, that really helped us so much, is we just kept talking to people. We were putting ourselves into different pitch contests. We're talking to educators. Do you know anybody that we can talk to? And so whether you're a teacher with an idea, or a parent with an idea, or an entrepreneur who sees a problem that you want to try to solve, it is really reaching out and connecting and building your own network, because you do put yourself in the best opportunities for luck. It doesn't come to you. You got to put yourself out there, I believe.
Yeah. So when I mentioned luck, it was, I think finding the gamba was luck.
Yeah.
But what I mean by that is he's made us feel very lucky. It is hard work. It is a lot of persistence. There's a lot of no's that you have to get past. The answer no, the answer not now, the answer, oh, I don't need that. So I think it is aligning yourself with like-minded people with the same passion and the same mission. And I think the same, they want the same outcomes for your audience. And I think if you can find those people and you learn from each other and collaborate, I think that is step by step how you move forward.
Mhm.
But Dotan, absolutely, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's the longest overnight success you'll ever have.
That's so good. Yeah.
It's no, I don't know. I read that somewhere. I can't claim that. I think it's out of a song, but it's yeah, it's work, but it's passion.
And it's really getting comfortable with what some people might perceive as failures along the way. You know, we talk about the build break model. We got to build something, go out there and find a way to get it broken to make sure we're growing. And you know, another example of this was we were doing a pilot in a school in Pennsylvania. There was a relationship with UPenn, and we deployed. And we weren't getting the parent uptake that we expected. And so we figured out, well, how can we break the system? Like, here's our system, here's our process. What do you break to make it, to change something? And we really started working with the children and rewarding the children for getting more GABs per week. And we threw a pizza party in there. It went up like 100%, or literally overnight. There was more parent engagement, there was more conversations, because we found a way to empower the children even more. And other than just entering it, they could go home and tug on the shirt sleeves and say, hey, can we have a conversation about this GAB? I'm going to get points for it, and I really want the points. Part of homework, part of a reward of some kind. But finding creative ways to move forward is so important, and being willing to, make mistakes. It's a constant mistake and rebuild effort.
Sounds it. So what can you tell us specifically? I mean, I know that you told us a little bit about how you networked and you kept trying, but are there any golden nuggets that you can give us? Like, go see this person or go to this conference?
Yeah, I think, again, it comes back to knowing your market and understanding what problem you're trying to solve and who cares about your problem. Mm-hmm. We were going to a lot of events that people didn't really, parent engagement wasn't their focus. We're talking to people who parent engagement wasn't their focus. Mm-hmm. When we got into our sweet spot, John Gamba, Andy Danilchek, Dr. Mike Nukula at UPenn, Dr. Mike Rovian at UPenn, when they heard what we were doing, we got into a dome of parent engagement. It was amazing how much conversation they got immediately. They were trying to figure out how to help us. There was a lot of problem solving going on, a lot of how do we do this? How do we do that? There was a lot of building going on in every conversation that we have with them. When we get into your domain, when you get into your peeps, when you find your peeps, it's amazing what can happen, but it takes a while to find them, because you got to keep, especially if you don't know them right away. We didn't know this UPenn team even existed until we ran into John Gamba, and then we got introduced. And now through them, we're meeting all these other wonderful people who really care about parent engagement. Not that anyone doesn't care about it, but they know how important it is. Those relationships that kids build so early, as Pam Cantor talks about, Dr. Pam Cantor talks about, when kids get on their flywheel, they find their thing, get in their zone, with the help of their relationships, the help of their peeps, that's where everything changes.
Wow. So how long did it take you before you met John?
We had been.
It actually wasn't that, for us, it wasn't that long. We had our son using it, and then our daughter using it, a couple of classrooms. We were just starting that organic growth when we landed at Learn Launch and met John Gamba.
Yeah, it was kind of like, let's see what we can do with this. Let's find out, at the very beginning, it was not the idea of let's go build a business. It was, let's go solve a problem. Who else wants this problem to be solved in their school, in their home, in their family? And we just started figuring out, like, who cares about this? And then I don't know, Learn Launch happened, and then
then
within UPenn happened within a month or two after that. We were in the
Yeah.
Milk of Penn contest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Because when we met John, he said, you've got like 3 days to finish the application if you want to apply. We finished that. We sat up that night working on it. We finished it, submitted it. And then we heard the wonderful news about 3-4 weeks later
Yeah.
that we got in.
Yeah.
And then we were in the UPenn world. And so it's been transformation.
Yeah.
You spoke, you keep speaking about the problem, like identify the problem and trying to solve a problem. And I find it fascinating because in your case, the problem is so simple. It's so transparent. I mean, it's so actually visible, but transparent in some way. It's a matter of one word that the parents hear. Most parents, if you ask them, not necessarily they'll tell you it's a problem, right? It's just, that's how it is. And you've found that spot, that little problem, and realized that this is actually a huge problem. I can tell you from, you have this, you identified that problem in your community, in your family. I can tell you from oceans away here in Israel, that this is exactly the same problem that I hear parents complaining about. Not always they come and complain about, but when you really talk to them and ask them how is it for your child at school, and then they say, actually we're not exactly sure. Every time we ask them, they say fine, and we never get to really do a conversation about it. So it's exactly the same problem in probably everywhere on the planet, or in our in modern society on the planet. And that's great. I mean, it's sometimes for entrepreneurs, it's actually the hardest part is to identify the exact problem. They think they have the problem, and then they figure out actually it's not this problem, it's another problem, it's a variety of problems. So I think that the fact that you were able to identify such a specific and so international, so broad problem is part of this part of why people relate to this so much.
Yeah, and if I could build on that a little bit, one of the things that's really interesting you said is that some parents will say, it's fine, I talk to my kid every day, and I've got a good relationship with them. And we had a parent who is very involved with his sons. He's involved with both. One's an Eagle Scout, one's going to Eagle this year. He's the Scout Master. Spends lots of time with them. And I asked him, just give it a try. I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And to make a long story short, one of the GABs that came home from one of his sons was science. And the topic was, what he wrote in was nothing. Now, science in this situation meant biology. And the parents, and I love how I have a lot of examples where parents made an assumption about what a GAB meant. And the assumption was, this boy is in biology. He loves biology. This is his favorite class in school. He puts all his time into it. But during COVID, his grades were suffering substantially. He went from A's and almost failing every class. He was really struggling throughout his academic career at this point. And the GAB turned out to be nothing meant, I'm bored. I don't like it anymore. What I'm interested in, because they were studying something in biology that he just wasn't connecting with, because he was on Zoom, not in classroom, not connecting with his teacher. But what he was doing was he was very interested in DNA. He wanted to study DNA. He'd been spending most of his time on YouTube looking up what researchers are doing. What does research mean in studying DNA? How do you do that? Where do you go for school for that? And what it became was an aha moment for that father saying, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I thought I knew what was going on. I thought things were okay. They're not okay. My son's really struggling here. And then what was interesting, he said it became part of the family conversation going forward, and it was a comfortable conversation. The boy was struggling to bring up this topic and this challenge that he was having. Once it came out that he brought it out in the conversation, now it was open, and they can have it. Now they're working on how to get that child more focused and more engaged in what he's interested in, and he's doing much better.
So Tom, I loved what you said about it's the simple problems that are sometimes the toughest nut to crack. And they've been researching for over 40 years, the impact of family engagement, and are still researching it today, which means we haven't solved the problem yet. And all the families that are having that daily dialogue of how was your day? Fine. What'd you do? Nothing. They're it's like checking a box, but you're not really connecting.
Mhm.
And so it's a huge opportunity cost, because family connectedness and that relationship, giving the student that confidence, there's going through that dialogue academically, they're retracing their day, they're recalling their event, their storytelling, they're practicing communication skills, they're checking those boxes. But what really happens often is that those smaller conversations or smaller moments that happen in school about a subject, about a topic, about an event or activity, they evolve into bigger conversations at home about social situations, peer situations, things that are happening in the real world. And there's a lot going on in the real world. So how does that affect that child's life? How do they manage through that? Where is their anxiety? So there's so many conversations that come from that's the start of the GAB. And that family connectedness is so important and such a foundation for that student returning into school so much more engaged,
Yeah.
so much more confident in their classroom.
And one of the things we're working on that's part of our delivery model now is educating parents more, doing a better job of coaching them. And the number one message is you really matter more than you know. These small little conversations can lead, as Sylvia said, to so much. And that connection is so much of scaffolding, modeling, evolving. I'm okay, you're okay, we're okay. And all of these little settling that happens with that and this modeling that takes place can be, for some kids, trajectory changing. And parents don't understand how powerful that is with a simple 5 or 10 minute conversation 2 or 3 times a week, preferably more, but at least that much. John Gabrielli of MIT said, it is magical what the dialogue, consistent dialogue between a parent and a child has on their brain and their cognitive skills going forward. It's in his quote, it's magical what parent engagement can do for children.
Mm-hmm. And so many people think of family engagement as going into the school.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Going in for a parent conference or going in to help volunteer at a class party. But there are many and diverse barriers to families, parents being able to go in to schools. They may have multiple jobs. They may not have had a trustworthy education experience themselves. The reasons are profound. And so how do we better bring school to home? Not necessarily through homework, but through a student experience and through sharing from the student's perspective what their day looked like.
Sylvia, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I had once worked at LA Unified School District in East LA. And there were all kinds of barriers there. As you said, we had parents with 2, 3 jobs, people who didn't speak English, me with my broken Spanish. It just all kinds of problems, parents who just weren't engaged, that just knew they had to get their kids in school, that was the right thing to do, but didn't know what they could do on their end. So what do we do about that problem? Do you have an idea of how to develop some kind of ed tech that can help that? Or do you know of any tech that's out there that's already addressing the problem?
Well, I think GAB-on addresses that problem. We were chatting with a superintendent out in California, and he said to us, I would like to offer GAB-on as the only homework that my students in secondary schools do. And talk about, our earlier part of the conversation about having it used for something completely unexpected. But it told me several things. I think it taught us how important family engagement is in a child's school experience. It taught us how important building those relationships between school and home are. And it has to be simple. And it has to be unique. It doesn't necessarily need to be about specifically about the work that's being done. It's about the child's experience with their work that they're doing at the school.
Yeah, we're talking to another superintendent right now who had it's not California, but it's in Pennsylvania. There's another superintendent who has a large population of people who aren't Native American, not native to America. They are immigrants from Latin America. And they're not comfortable going to the school or going into the school or participating in the school. And his thought is what we were just talking about is if we can bring students can bring home these topics to talk about, they can get the parents engaged there and start working with them from that perspective. Another problem he's looking to try to solve, and our problem that we're solving is conversations between a parent and a child. For a child to bring a GAB home, they have to be in the school. They have to be participating in something. And so when we talked about it, he said, well, the child has to be in the school to be able to enter their GABs and have something to talk about related to school. They have to be there. So there will be less absenteeism. I wonder if it helps solve our absentee problem. So it's a challenge we didn't think about, but it's a problem. We're solving our problem in the middle, but on the side, we have other things that can be accomplished through it. And they're looking at it as an outreach program as much as it is a parent engagement program.
That's amazing.
I think we're just at the beginning at solving the parent engagement problem. I think there are, just during this conversation, my mind came up with at least 2 more ideas in that field. I think that also the online space brings new opportunities for parents to be more engaged, maybe do stuff together or learn together with their kids once the distance and the physical space of school is not anymore a barrier. They can do it from home. So, I came up with some ideas already that I'll share with you at a different point, a different time. But I think, I want to do a little twist on the use cases that you described. And I'm thinking about people who own educational businesses like enrichment providers, after school providers, people that are running amazing programs. Given and I'm coming from the summer camp space, so it's kind of the same. And, we invest a lot in the program. We invest a lot in delivering an amazing experience for the kids, but then our customer is the parent, right? So we want the customer, the parent, to really know and feel all that value that we delivered. Can a solution like GAB-on help with that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think if kids are bringing home these hints and reminders and talking about it at home, it's going to light the parents up and say, oh, this is helpful. I'm seeing the change in my child, or I'm hearing about their experiences. I think they have no window into that child's day without that. You can send home newsletters, and most parents receive emails, newsletters, updates, and they sometimes read them. They don't always have time to sit down and read them, but they might be in the car with that child, driving them home from camp or picking them up from camp, and that 10-minute, 20-minute, maybe an hour-long drive home is a perfect time for a conversation. I have some of my best we call them GAB-versations, with the kids in the car. Right. When I get in the car, I open up my phone, I say, oh, here's the GABs, I put them down. Why don't we go through those on the drive home? And sometimes it's a 5-minute conversation. Sometimes it's 20 minutes or half an hour, depending on how many and how engaging the conversation is. So I think it's a really great window into almost any experience, school, after school, camps, events, because it helps kids. One thing I did when I first started this is, I'm going to go date myself here, but I was at GE Capital for a while, and I was a Six Sigma black belt, which is really how do you look at a process and break it down to its individual parts, pieces of parts, and improve the process. And I actually sat Gracie down one day and said, take me through your day. Tell me your process. Tell me your daily experiences. What do you do? Where are you? Who you engage with? Who you talking to? Now, she was quite young and, what's going on here, Dad? But I mapped out all the things that she did, and it was 7 hours of experiences. And each one of them was so rich. But when I asked her, so why don't you tell me about this at home? She's like, I don't know where to start. I don't know what you want to hear. So when we say, these are the things you want to be able to tell your parents, it's easier for them. And so it can talk about camps, it can talk about events, whether it's online, in person. It's that door opener for the child.
We actually had a camp this summer, a YMCA camp in Texas, use GAB-on for their campers. And the feedback was fantastic because, to your point, Dotan, they're doing a lot of fun things. And the counselors want parents to know that they're doing a lot of fun things, but also it's a really long, busy day with a multitude of activities. So for, as Jarrid said, the child come home and be able to retrace, recall, and pinpoint that moment to share. It's a great starting point. So yeah, we and the other piece of this is what we found this out through the camp, deploying at the camp, is that families are really complex. They look different to everybody. So it's not always parents who are gabbing with that child. It's grandparents who are gabbing with the child. It's coaches, it's mentors, it's guidance counselors at school. So how we built the platform was certainly for parents and children to connect, but that's not always the case. You know, what we've discovered through going through some military deployments is that there are deployed parents. There are parents living in different houses. There are grandparents where the kids are staying. So that trusted adult, that caregiver, it is also part of that family engagement.
And Jackie, I know we had really a short time. I would still want to ask one quick question, maybe with a quick answer, because you did mention COVID and the effect of it and kids learning remotely and from home and online. But I want to ask you from the positive angle of things. If you have learned anything during that online time about what online educational experience they did produce positive reports, like positive GABs. If you can give us an example or some guidelines of what worked.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in real quick and say, I think there were a few silver linings from COVID. And one of them was the discovery of parent engagement, and that parents were indeed, I would say, involuntarily volunteering to be part of their child's education. But I think now parents have a taste of that and they recognize how important that is, and they don't necessarily want to lose that. And I think educators realize that there's an enormous opportunity to maintain that involvement and that engagement from families. So I do think that was a silver lining from COVID.
And I think another silver lining is some kids really were successful with online learning. You know, we have, with our two kids, our son his grades had never been better than being online. Our daughter's she still did well, it was harder for her. My son loved it. He loved being remote and being able to concentrate on his work.
Yeah, I think that's a huge eye opener for some families, is that some kids really thrived when they didn't have to worry about being in a social setting with different types of pressures, and they could really focus on their work and perhaps even choose the work they want to do. So I think that, you know, again, they're just changing the trajectory of education and how that might meet the needs of even more kids.
Yeah, I know as an educator, it really surprised me. I had some kids that flourished online. So we are, as Dotan said, really running out of time. But I want to ask this question for our community, our Facebook community out there. They're entrepreneurs, they might be parents, they might be educators, whatever their interest is in joining this community. So what lessons did you learn on your journey to develop GAB-on that you'd like to share with them?
Yeah, I think the first one, 2 minutes. So the most important lesson I think that we've talked a little bit about already is the ability and the willingness to put yourself out there into communities that matter, that care about the problem you're trying to solve or the solution you're trying to bring. And then being willing to build and break. You got to start with something and be willing to have alterations as you go to fit your need. But at the same time, you got to stay true to your core. We had one superintendent stand up and say, you're going to deploy in my district first, but you're going to stay true to your core. You're going to be a parent engagement app, student-led, student-managed. Anything beyond that, don't do it. stay in your lane, but understand how your lane can change within that focus. I think that's a challenge I find with a lot of entrepreneurs is exactly what is my lane? How much am I willing to change that? And what do I keep away from it? You know, you can solve all kinds of problems and you can become too much of a problem solver. Stay to one that you really can win from and then grow from there, I think is the biggest lesson I've learned through GAB-on and other experiences.
And I will say, find the right partners,
Yes.
know
Oh,
your
well.
strengths, and collaborate when your family of partners grows, your immediate circle grows.
Yeah. The network is so vital.
Be authentic, be trustworthy.
And the other thing I'd say is purpose.
And
This is a really, as you know, Dotan and Jackie, this is an up and down experience. There's highs and there's extreme lows. If you're not really passionate or your purpose isn't really strong in your intestinal fortitude, it's hard to keep going. It's very strong for us. So we keep going, but you got to have that intestinal fortitude to stick it through the good and the bad.
but we wish everyone out there who's taking this journey just to stay strong and stick with it.
Oh, that's so wonderful. So I want to thank you so much, Jarrid and Sylvia. I think you've given our community a lot to chew on when they walk away from this today. Dotan, as usual, your insight is amazing. And I just want to say to everyone out there, thanks again, that I encourage you, please, to join our Facebook group, because each week we're going to have amazing guests like we had today who can help you through your journey to develop your tech, to develop your idea, your innovation, and just to help you as perhaps an educator or a parent or someone who's just interested in being a lifelong educator. So with that, I'll say goodbye to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so
both
much
so
for having us.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you.